Hey,
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 Seth.
hey, how you doing, Jeremy? How you doing?
I'm
I'm,
good, man. Glad to be here.
oh, great to have you again. I was expecting TJ just to pop up, but I realised it's us today. It's you and I, man. So
Let's do it, man.
yeah, this is like an audition because if you do better than TJ, he's out.
A lot
TJ
of
is
pressure.
out. TJ is out. No, TJ's definitely part of the furniture, and so are you now, to be fair. But welcome again to Universal Recovery, and welcome to you all to Universal Recovery. Another session, another show where we talk about addiction, mental health, and trauma, and anything really, but with a bit of fun to it as well. But also try and give you a message of hope to people who actually need that. Just to get a few things out of the way. As always, I got my show on Thursday. This Thursday, I have the amazing Leanne Naylor who's joining us. So please come and join me at 8 p.m. UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And of course, next Tuesday, we'll be back again. Next Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Feel Good Factor TV, Sky Channel 191, 9:30 p.m. UK, where I'm the lead host of Men's Talk. So we look forward to having you. And if there's any questions that you need to ask us about recovery or anything like that, you got TJ's and my website below. Keep the messages coming as always. Please leave your name on so we know who you are. We can give you a shout out with any messages. And today we are joined by who was a guest of ours last week, who's now a host of mine of ours today, and that's Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. Welcome to Universal Recovery.
Thanks, Seth. I'm excited to be back in conversation with you, man.
Yeah, we had a good time last week. It was great having the three of us and talking
Yeah.
about conscious recovery and various things in recovery, which some people don't even talk about. But it's great to talk about the modality and the creation that TJ and you are very much involved with, have come together and brought to the world. Because I believe there's two more. Is there two more rehab centers they're using conscious recovery now?
That's right. Yeah, we had two more sign up on the East Coast of the United States. And so they were actually the first programs outside of California. And so we're starting to see a lot of growth, and it's exciting, Saf. It's kind of indescribable how good it feels, man.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And long may it continue, because there's a lot of value to conscious recovery. And again, as we always say, we're not disregarding any other modality, not at all. We're just saying that conscious recovery is an additional modality, additional creation, additional program that you could look at. Hi, Jed. Jed's joined us. How you doing, my brother? Good to see you. We're going to get you on here soon. Trust me, Jed. You'll be on. Welcome, Jed, to Spirituality Gone Wild and to Universal Recovery. Yes, we are Spirituality Gone Wild, by the way. Should have mentioned that first. I was reading an article, which I've got here. Not an article, but I've got about Dr. Gabor Mate, who's obviously a renowned addiction expert. And he calls for a compassionate approach towards addiction. And what he says and what he believes, and I know we believe a little bit like this as well, if not fully, is that the source of addiction is not to be found in the genes, but it's to be found in early childhood environment. What are your thoughts about that? Because genes or not genes, what I can say is that 100% of the clients that I've worked with, and I do work with, have suffered some kind of trauma in childhood, and that's a fact. But I also know that not everyone who suffered trauma in childhood gets dependent on a drink or drug, or turns to a drink or drug. What are your thoughts about that, Jeremy? That it's not a brain disease. It's not part of a brain disease model. It's part of early childhood trauma.
Sure, yeah, and I love Dr. Gabor Mate's work. I think he's one of the really prominent figures in our field. And I think to answer your question, Saf, I'd want to start with a disclaimer that, right before we got on the air, you made a really important point, and that is that no matter what model we're leaning into, no matter what our path of recovery is, that 100% of the people can get better. And I think that that's really important to lead with, that There are so many people doing such incredible work through a medical lens, through a spiritual lens, through a mental emotional lens. And I think the more we all try and work with this in different ways, the better. So that's kind of my disclaimer. And to answer your question specifically, I 100% agree with Gabor. And one of the foundational principles of conscious recovery is that one of the core root causes of addiction is unresolved trauma. And so I think we've seen a big shift in the industry where, 10 years ago, we weren't necessarily looking at trauma. It was really dealing with symptoms and behaviors. And that's still true today. But I think that as we recognize the impact of early childhood and, how that manifests in later years of life, we're really clear that while 100% of people may not develop addiction from trauma, I think that 100% of people who do have trauma. And so it is tough to work with because, I get pushback on it a lot, and people say, Jeremy, I mean, my best friend had childhood trauma and they're not a heroin addict. And that happens. That is absolutely true. I think the important distinction is that everybody who does develop addictive tendencies or addiction in any form, if we look early enough, we'll find unresolved trauma. And I think another important thing to bring to light is that trauma is often viewed as some massive event. A lot of people associate it as sexual trauma or physical abuse. And for a long time, there was this expression, big T trauma and little t trauma. And I had a lot of contention with that because to me, trauma is trauma. And what I'm really excited about now is that the industry is shifting away from that. And clinicians more and more widespread are holding space for the fact that trauma is trauma, and it really doesn't matter what it was, but the implications of it.
I was just about to talk about the big T trauma, little T trauma, but you just came in with that. But I think when people do say big T trauma, little T trauma, I think it's okay to say it, but you shouldn't disregard the little T trauma, because, as you rightly said, there is no big T, little T. But I think the reason why people differentiate that, because, for example, as you said, sexual abuse or murder, tragic murder, it can be perceived and seen as a bigger trauma than someone who's experienced a loss.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we talk about trauma, especially in addiction or any trauma really, it's about what's happening to the person who has experienced an event.
Yep.
Whether it's that or whether it's that.
Yep.
It's not about big T, little t, sexual abuse, a loss of a family friend or a girlfriend or boyfriend has left you. It's the trauma that what the person is experiencing within, and what do they do with that trauma? How do they act with that trauma?
Mm-hmm. And
in our experience, it seems that everyone that we work with in addiction has experienced some kind of trauma. Mm-hmm. But so why are some people who've experienced trauma, why do they turn to drugs and alcohol and some don't? Is it because they're more spiritually fit than them? Is it because they've been brought up better than them? Is it because the surroundings are better? Because I know people, and we know that addiction doesn't discriminate. I know people who've been brought up in an amazing environment. I know people who've been brought up in a lot of money, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But I know people who've been brought up, with churchgoers and everything, and have suffered whatever they've suffered and have turned to addiction. So I don't think it's the environment per se, but what stops somebody who suffered trauma not to go to addiction, and why does someone goes to addiction? Mm-hmm. Where's that come from?
Sure. I think that's a pretty layered question, and a really important one too. And I think in my experience, because I've counseled people, addicts that are worth more money than I even really understand. And, and they'll call me crying from their Ferrari, and so you're absolutely right. It really doesn't discriminate. And I think what's really important to look at when we're looking at trauma and addiction is like what conscious recovery speaks to is core false beliefs, these things that we hold true about ourselves that impact and essentially create what we call reality. So, for example, I remember being a young kid, and the way I internalized certain things in my environment was different than, say, my neighbor. So even though I had loving parents, and oftentimes people will say, I grew up in a great home. I don't have trauma. I grew up in a great home. And the distinction that's really important is that it's the environment matters, but only to a certain degree. What matters more is the way in which we respond to it. So when I look at people who early in life experienced a major loss, that's a pretty glaring trauma that, losing a grandparent they felt very connected with, very trusting and very loving, that is a big experience. But there's also this whole other side where as a child, we don't have the mental or emotional capacity to understand the reason people are doing what they're doing. So as a child, if I do something as a request for love and that gets denied, whether it's just a quick thing, I'm at Target and I want to hold my mom's hand and she denies that, well, to an adult, that doesn't seem like a big deal at all. But in the mind of a child, where they don't have, they're not developed enough to recognize that mom's just busy or mom's going through something on her own. No, we internalize it as there's something wrong with me. I requested love. I was rejected. And that thought gets planted deeply in the subconscious. And it can manifest later in life as this core false belief that my needs will never get met, or I'm unlovable, or I'm incapable of asking for what I need.
I'm not good enough. I'm not good
enough. Right. And when you think about just that thought of, I can't ask for what I need. And it seems like such a small thing, but if you live life vibrating from that frequency for 20 years, well, by the time you're 30, you've been walking around thinking that you're incapable or afraid to ask for your needs to be met. How does that show up? And so when I look at addiction, and oftentimes when I'm working with someone who says, oh, Jeremy, I don't have any trauma, I don't argue with them, because it's not about me being right and them about being wrong, or me trying to fix them. But I get really curious about what they learned early on in life, as Don Miguel Ruiz would say in the Four Agreements, how we've been domesticated, and really get curious about the impact of those things we learned really early on. And one of the things I love about Gabor Mate is that he speaks to this all the time, the importance of hugging and loving our children, because unfortunately and fortunately, they are so absorbent to energy and situation and environment that even though it may not seem like a big deal to us, it's everything in the mind of a child.
When you say childhood trauma, when you talk about childhood, how young are we talking? Are we talking from infant, from babies?
Sure.
Start from that early?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, I've worked with people like myself who were adopted, and oh, nice. Awesome. Okay, cool. So
I was adopted from birth, actually.
Yeah. So with adoption, it's really, it gets me so curious, because I recently found my birth family and reunited with them.
Oh, you are as well?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I found my birth family. And so naturally, a lot of my curiosity was around addiction and, whether or not they had addiction, and what it was like for the 3 or 4 weeks that I was with my birth family before I went with my adopted family. And when I looked at my attachment styles in my early teens through my late 20s, I recognized that I was incredibly codependent. And when I met my birth family and I was asking my birth mom about what our time was like, I spent a lot of time in the hospital alone and with very infrequent visits, very unpredictable visits. So even as an infant, what I was recording or learning about the world was that this love that I was supposed to be getting full time, I was getting part time. And when I think about that now and I look at my attachment styles, it's glaringly obvious that even though I have no memory of that, no conscious awareness of that, all of my relationships have showed up as very codependent and very like I'll only let people so close because of, at least in my mind, what I attribute it to is those first few months that I was on this planet in this form. And so to me, I think it starts as early as birth, and it can manifest at any point along the line, even someone in their 20s, 30s. It really doesn't matter in my mind.
I mean, I didn't know that we have something very much in common. I mean, you were adopted, it seems, 3 to 4 weeks after.
Mm-hmm.
I was adopted at birth, but because I was 2.5 months premature, as I was delivered, which I always call my first abandonment, I was in an incubator because I was so small, and then I still don't know to this day. But both of my adopted parents have passed away, and I never had a chance to ask. But I'm not sure how long I was in the incubator for. But as soon as I came out of the incubator, I was with the adoptive family in London, which I call my second abandonment, because my new home was the incubator. My first home out of the womb, out of the utero, was the incubator.
Right.
And I always call that my second abandonment. And then at the age of 11, when I went to boarding school, which was a very hard experience for 6 years, the fact that I went to boarding school was my third abandonment. And I've always wanted to study and look further into the links between adoption and addiction, because in my case I was adopted and I was into addiction. But when I talk about trauma, see, because obviously unconsciously, we're not aware what's happening. But when I always talk about trauma, for me, I always talk about the trauma that I experienced at the age of 11, and not only was I was experiencing it from there, it was then I started using alcohol to start with, and over the years I haven't really I've been reluctant to think about the adoption and everything that happened prior to me going to boarding school. Possibly, we've got a few questions, not questions, but we've got people saying hi to us. So let me, of course, Jed's here. Jed's saying awesome, glad to join you all. He goes on to say, counterbalancing your feelings to overcome the trauma with a good feeling. Oh, wow. Okay. So basically he's saying, I think, is that when you turn to addiction, or you turn to a substance, or you turn to a behavior, whatever it may be, if it makes you feel good, you're counteracting the trauma by feeling good by doing something addictive or doing something like that. I think that's where you come from. I've got a Facebook user who says, great, I'd love to know who you are. He won't tell me your name. So whoever said great, please, if you can't change it to your name, please just let us know who you are so we can give you a shout out. Hi, Kelly. Welcome. Welcome to Universal Recovery. Kelly says, hey, but she also says, and this is what I wanted to touch on as well. She also said, and this is a very good point, actually. And she says, my trauma started in the womb. I'm gonna pass that question on to Jeremy, Kelly. But if you want to disclose why you think or why you say that, please put a comment down. And hopefully it may resonate with what Jeremy's saying. And the Facebook user is called Beth. Hi, Beth. Good stuff. Good stuff to you. Welcome. Go on, Jeremy. Yeah. So Kelly says that my trauma started in the womb. And I believe that for me now as well. But what's your understanding, or what's your thoughts about when someone says their trauma started in the womb? And did your trauma start in the womb?
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it honestly, it seems like a very abstract concept. It seems very subjective where, I've brought that up and I've had pushback, basically saying like, well, in the womb, like what could be like nothing's happening. You're just kind of growing and your brain isn't developed and whatever. Um, what I hold to be true is that, and something TJ speaks to often is that our default state of existence is joy, and I've seen that. A bunch of my friends have kids, and I love studying them and just watching them in the world because you can see that they are just completely at joy. They're at peace. Even when they're throwing a fit and freaking out because they didn't get this or they didn't get that, uh, generally speaking, their default position is joy. When I think about uh, infancy and pre-birth and post-birth, I think about the fact that as spiritual beings, we are very receptive to energy, both physically and spiritually and emotionally. And so when I'm around children, I watch them and they are incredibly receptive to the energetic presence or the energy of the room they're in. And so when I think about just that, and I think about being in the womb, if the woman or the mother carrying the child is experiencing verbal abuse or her own trauma, however that shows up, I hold it to be true that whatever is happening for the mother is happening for the infant as well. And so I've had clients that I've worked with whose mothers were in abusive relationships, and the infant 100% takes on those experiences. And this is where genetics actually do come into play, because oftentimes what's imprinted on our lineage, genetic, they have actually discovered that there is such a thing as generational trauma, where traumas experienced generations past imprint on DNA that passes to us. And so there's a lot of Eastern philosophy and Native American philosophy that speaks to that, in that our existence partly is to heal our past generations. And so when I look at all these different modalities and philosophies and see them speaking to essentially the same thing, to me, it becomes absolutely concrete that that trauma can start as early as infancy in the womb. And we see that where throughout childhood, even if people have a good functioning home, where just these little nuances, these little requests for love that get denied absolutely carry a massive impact.
So that says as well, for people like us who have been adopted, there's a lot of things that may have gone on without us. We'll never know.
And Saf, I love that you point to that, because when I found my birth family, of course, I was overwhelmed with joy and love and just amazement that I actually found them. And when we were together, I was really just trying to be in the energy of their presence. And I couldn't help but, partly view these things through my clinical lens, and with this curiosity of like, wow, I wonder if I could finally discover a little bit more of why I am the way that I am. Because Saf, I mean, you and I couldn't look to our parents necessarily to understand why we are the way we are. And so when I was with my birth family, both parents coincidentally did struggle with addiction. And when I heard about their relationship and kind of the way in which I was brought into the world, I can't tell you how much of it all of a sudden made perfect sense. The reason I energetically wall off to a very loving, compassionate relationship, where from a very deeply subconscious place, I refute compliments and love, because when I was very, very young, I needed it and didn't get it. And I had to figure out how to do it on my own. And this is very early on in life. I don't have conscious memory of this or conscious awareness. But what I do know is that if I really drop down into my heart space, into my essential nature below ego and analytical mind, what I know to be true is that at that age, I really needed a mother's love. And I got it, but in very small, unpredictable amounts. And what did that create? And so when I was speaking to my birth parents, both of them, it was very clear to me that their relationship was very dysfunctional, very codependent. Their attachment styles were very unhealthy. And even though I was thousands of miles away, I was experiencing the same thing. And that's pretty incredible. And that's very useful information.
I'm actually looking for my birth family quite now, and I hope it's not too late. But we've got a lot of excellent, wonderful messages. Beth says she's reading a book regarding trauma in the womb, epigenetics. And she goes on to say that it's not just your mother's womb, it's your grandmother's and your great-grandmother's womb. She's saying it's some powerful stuff. Kelly has come up with some sad comments in terms of what she's been through, or her mum. She goes, my dad would punch my mum in the belly when she was being carried. And then when she was born, it seems her mum was always trying to give her away. And then she was adopted by her stepdad. So she lost, she says, I lost my Cherokee families, but now she's found them. And I think that's definitely a lot of trauma at a young age, without even knowing how old you were when you were adopted. Again, as myself and Jeremy said, that it's not about the age you experienced the trauma, it's the fact that you've experienced the trauma, full stop, and it can happen at any time. And even if you do experience it early, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be doing addictive behaviors early. That can also happen at any time. So there's no specific time to either, but they're very much connected. Kelly goes and say that's the sugar in the frosting. I like that. That's the sugar in the frosting. Thank you, Kelly. Please keep on coming in and welcome. I don't. I'm not sure if you've been in our show before, but it's the first time I'm hearing from you. So welcome to the show, and hope you enjoy it. She's saying mum married me off when I was 15. I'm not sure which part of the world you are, Kelly, but in some parts it's illegal to marry someone off that young. And yeah, I mean, this is, I believe, another traumatic event if you are getting forced to be married. So Kelly's you've been through a lot. And if you want to speak to either myself or Jeremy or TJ privately about anything, please go on my website, TJ's website, send us an email. Find Jeremy on Facebook, send him a message, and we'll see if we can help you in some way. And that's what we're here for, everyone. If anyone needs any help or any assistance or any kind of guidance, please do not hesitate to contact us. We're here for that, and see if we can do. So yeah, so it's now you said that you found that both of your birth parents were in addiction. That I don't know about mine, but I wouldn't be surprised. So we're both saying that, and I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised, yet we're coming from a level that we don't necessarily believe it's a genetic thing. But yet we both are recognizing it as a genetic thing. But we also recognized it as a traumatic thing. So can there be an element of genes in this?
I think so. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in the conversation of which model or which lens is the most effective or which one's right. And, And that was me for the majority of my recovery. I've been in recovery for 12 years now. And I remember the first 5, I thought there was only one way to get sober. And the more I've grown, the more I've experienced and worked in the field at large, what I've really come to is a place of complete openness when it comes to the reasons or the contributing factors to why we're addicted. And I think that genetics does play a role. Where I get a little contentional about it is that I don't think it's the only role. I don't think that any one thing is the only reason we turn to drugs and alcohol. And so what I like to live in is the question, the nuance, kind of the in-between area where, like, if I look at my life as an example, I see generational trauma. I see my own trauma. I see a failure to have my needs met as an infant, as a child, as a teen, even as an adult. I see all various types of trauma. I see toxic shame and core false beliefs and some cognitive distortions, if you will. So when I look at my own recovery and ask, why have I been successful in my ability to not use drugs and alcohol as a way of being in the world anymore, I think it's a real testament to all of those things that I've worked through. So, working in process groups on the way I see the world, working with clinicians and therapists and psychologists on my unresolved trauma, working with a bunch of incredible spiritual thought leaders on fostering a relationship with who I truly am. And all of these things have contributed to a life where I don't wake up and need substance to get through the day. And so when I'm speaking to people in recovery, I like to really stay in the conversation of both and, not this or. So, people in 12 steps have a certain perspective on addiction and recovery. And I think that's wonderful. Dr. Gabor Mate has a different perspective, and that's also wonderful. And so I think what's really important is finding what resonates with you the most and pursuing that, and also fostering a real curiosity about what else is there, because my recovery only got great at year 9. I had been sober for 9 years, but I was so white knuckled that it was just about not using or drinking. And once I really got curious about what's underneath, that's when the real growth started to happen.
It's a very important point. And also, when we talk about addiction, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just substances we're talking about, it's behavioral addiction as well. Because you can over excessively do something as well, and there's always a reason behind that. And Mate says, Gabor says, he's famous for saying, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And pain and trauma are very much linked. And he's definitely coming from that angle. Jed, hi. He goes, the past is our creator for tomorrow's dream. Live and learn, baby, and own your destiny. Live and learn, baby, and own your destiny. Well, yeah. I mean, a saying that I say, which I think what he's saying is trying to be victims of your past and be masters of your destiny. But then I think Jed might be a 12-stepper. I'm not sure, but don't they in the 12 steps? And I did the 12 steps as well, and it served great purpose to me. Don't they in the 12 steps look at the past a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and try and not try and dissolve it, but try and dissolve it in a way that let's forget about it. Yeah, you've got to let go of the past to help you with the future. But I'm someone who believes, and again, there's so many different thoughts, and I want to stress to everyone, try it all. Please try it all. It's what works. And 12 steps work for me, and it still does. And I still use some of the principles, and I still use some of the steps on a daily basis. But I'm also a strong believer about not neglecting or ignoring the past, but still to acknowledge them and still to see why one did one. And yes, a lot of it is down to addiction and because of trauma, but a lot of it also is, as we say in conscious recovery, I don't know why I said we, but I'm hoping to we use it as a brilliant strategy. All right. We and we're not just talking about drinking, taking drugs, watching porn, sex addiction, eating too much, shopping like a madman. We're talking about even stuff like selfishness, ego, lying. Uh, why does someone have these traits? Why are they using that? Is it because they're bad people? Okay, but why are they bad people? Why are they becoming like this? Because we're using it as a strategy for something, and it's good to recognize that as opposed to neglect it and not acknowledge it. Jed says 12 steps is cool, and I learned a lot. It's not intense enough to work quick enough when it comes down to life or death. And that's Jed. That's a great point what you put there, and that's what you get out of it. To some people, it does work. Yes, we do know that the success rate is not as high as we would like it to be in 12 steps, but it's not high in any of them. I think it's down to the person, down to the individual, how they've embraced recovery and the kind of work that they're willing to put in. And some modalities work better for some and some don't. For me, 12 steps work well, but I've moved on. And yes, I'm reading and learning about conscious recovery, which is a great help for me. But I think there's support groups out there as well that help. Being around like-minded people help. People who understand where you're coming from help. Looking within helps. Looking behind and reflecting on some things can help. Some people don't like to reflect back. Some people want to look for now and move forward. That can help. There's a lot of things that can help. So we're strongly encouraging you to try as many things as possible and see what helps for you. We will never disregard any modality, especially not the 12 steps that's been around probably the longest, since not the early 30s. And there has been success, but obviously we want as much success as possible for people who are suffering and who are going through addiction because of trauma, what we believe, but also because of survival, because of fear, whatever it may be. It all comes under the T, because we don't want to call it big T or little t, the T. It's an incredible subject, isn't it, Jeremy?
Yeah.
It's an incredible subject, especially when you look back. I mean, we're talking about adoption. I mean, there's a lot of people who are in addiction who aren't adopted at all, but they may have been neglected in some way. Because I believe adoption is you are neglected, and we're not. I'm not saying it's right or wrong that has happened, because I'm pretty much sure, and it'd be interesting to find out maybe off air when you first met your birth mother how the reaction was. Because when I first found out about my adoption, I was very resentful, and I felt rejected, and I felt sad. But as time has gone by and the more I've learned and the things that I've heard and blah, 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 I truly believe that if, and God willing, and I'll be blessed to see my birth mother in my life, I would say to her that I understand that it must have been very hard for you, because I can't see it being easy. And for someone to do that, there must be a valid reason, or must be a reason, strong enough reason for someone to go down that line. I mean, I've got Beth saying she wishes she was adopted. And you have your reasons, because obviously you haven't been happy through childhood with whatever you've gone through, and you've come from that, and that's fine. And maybe you're probably happy that you were adopted after hearing what you've heard. Maybe I might be happy that I was adopted if I get to hear the reasons for the adoption. I won't know until that happens.
Yeah, I could speak to that, Saf. When I first reunited with them, of course, there was really just a sense of overwhelm with, I mean, even just down to how much we look alike. And so it was very complex, all the different feelings. And of course, a few months after I met them, I went back and spent Christmas with them. And then it was this overwhelming sense of abandonment and, wishing I had been there. And that's a really important piece of information, because when I wish for something, especially when I'm looking to the past, wishing that something had been different, I get really curious, because that's me realizing that I have a wound or I had a need that wasn't met or still is not met. And so when I was there and I was overwhelmed by this feeling of abandonment and wishing that I had been there, I got curious about what did I actually really truly want in that wish. Well, I wished I had been there because I would have felt like part of the family. And then I said, well, that's interesting. Did I not feel a part of my adopted family? And the answer was yes and no. And I recognized, after a lot of really curious introspection, asking why about a lot of things I felt, I realized that even now, I really long for a feeling of acceptance, a feeling of this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And when I got all the way down through all those layers and recognized that that was the feeling I was attempting to remedy through wishing I had been there, I can now do something with that in real time, right? But if I leave it at just, I wish I had been there, well, I won't ever be able to change the fact that I wasn't. And so I'm really creating suffering, and I'm perpetuating my own suffering by wishing for something that I cannot achieve. And so through really curious introspection, I recognized the underlying belief or the underlying request that I had, that I was trying to achieve through this wish. And that is something that I can act upon and manifest. And so whenever I think of my attachment styles or my abandonment issues, if you want to call it that, what I'm aware of is that these are all things manifesting in the present, and I'm not going to do anything with it by trying to change the past. What I can do is get really curious and try and create whatever I need right now in the present. And I do that with a relationship with my inner child, little 5-year-old Jeremy that really just wanted a hug, or really just wanted to feel supported or accepted. And there are ways I can create that now. And so it's not about changing my thinking or changing my feeling, because everything we feel is perfect, right? There's no good feeling or bad feeling. They're just feelings. And so now the work is, how can I take care of little Jeremy in ways that he needed back then but didn't get? And that work is so fulfilling. And that is really how we can start immediately healing from trauma, toxic shame, our core false beliefs, is just digging down deep, recognizing that there is this piece of me that needed something and he didn't get it. But I'm an adult now, which means I can do whatever I want, including loving myself in a way that maybe I didn't get growing up. And that work is absolutely profound, and it's a big piece of the recovery puzzle, I think.
Most definitely. I mean, I did it when I was studying conscious recovery, and it was the most profound experience, speaking to my younger self. And it's like I had my eyes closed, and it was emotional. In fact, I was quite tearful, and I gave TJ a message straight away, saying, "I've just done this," and it was incredible, and but it was powerful. It was powerful. It's okay. Everything's okay. But we've just flown by. The 45 minutes have just gone by. We're going to finish on a couple of last messages very quickly. Bethany said, "I wish I was adopted," saying, "As a child, I wish I was adopted, not anymore." Ted saying, "I encourage all working towards bettering their life in all areas. Two minds are better than one, as we all come together to prosper." So I'm a strong believer. Work as a collective, work in a communion, and we can all grow together. Let's not ridicule each other for past mistakes. Let's go forward. And we have a hi from Brittany. Hi, Brittany. We are just finishing, but please join us next week with any messages, or if you want to get anything out or ask any questions, you can contact myself on the website, TJ on the website, or find Jeremy on Facebook, give him a message, and we'll try and guide you and help you through any questions that you may have. Jeremy, thank you. That was amazing. That was an amazing show.
Yeah.
I'm going to phone TJ and tell him he's sacked. No, so look, you're part of us now. You're part of Universal Recovery. So we'd like to think that, you're welcome to join us every week. You're welcome to join us as and when. I'm sure TJ would agree with me. We'd love to have you anytime and every time. So I'll leave that open to you.
Thank you, Saf.
Thank you. Beth says this was brilliant for me. Thank you. It was like I was meant to hear you both. No, all God's plan, as I say. And Kelly says thank you. It was a very good show, guys. Come next week as well. TJ will be back as always, and Jeremy may or may not join us, but it's not the last. Trust me, you'll see or hear with Jeremy. But thanks, Jeremy. Thank you again. Until next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You've been watching Universal Recovery. Show about addiction and trauma. This has been Spirituality Gone Wild. Universal Recovery every Tuesday at 6 p.m. UK time. Please check the time wherever you are. Again, don't forget my show this Thursday. I have Leanne Naylor on the show, and she's an incredible person, and that's at 8 p.m. UK time. If you can get access to Sky TV in the UK, Sky Channel 191, Sky Showcase, Feel Good Factor TV every Monday from 8 p.m. onwards. I'm on Men's Talk at 9:30. You can also check it on irzat.com. So if you go to irzat.com at 9:30 UK PM time and look for Feel Good Factor TV, you'll see me there as well. Last week we actually spoke about addiction, which was an amazing show. And of course, next Tuesday, back on Spirituality Gone Wild, Universal Recovery. Myself and TJ will definitely be back. Jeremy may or may not join us, but Jeremy's there if you ever need to speak to him. Guys, this has been Universal Recovery. Thank you very much. It's a bye from me. It's a bye from Jeremy. God bless. Take care. Stay safe. And let's move forward together.